Hey folks, today's show is brought to you by Fanly, the best sports app to keep track of all your teams in one place. Get highlights, news alerts, and tweets that make you a smarter fan. Get Fanly for free for Apple and Android, and you'll be amazed. You put up with other sports apps all these years. Fanly just has a wider range of better info, plus its design is so much cleaner and better. That's Fanly. Get Fanly for free and get smarter. Let's get to the show.
It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
All right. Yeah. Hey, let's do this. I am Chris Harris. This is the Harris Football Podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thanks to you, the little podcast that could. It's a top 5 sports podcast in the entire world, which is just crazy. We've existed for 6 weeks, for heaven's sake. Honestly, I feel like we all built this together, us along with you. You know, you've tweeted and you've Facebooked and you've emailed and voicemailed, and it's just great. This is, in my mind, really your show as much as it is mine, so thank you. And there's still room to grow. If you want us to keep going, if you want us to stay free, do me a favor, and right now, while you're thinking about it, tell one person, tell your brother or your friend or someone in your league. Please spread the word. This podcast isn't affiliated with a big media site, so we don't have an endless stream of potential listeners. It's all about how much you get the word out. So I actually am relying on you. Seriously, I need your help. Please spread the word to your followers and your friends.
Today's kickoff.
And to Amber. It's a jam-packed show today. We finally got a full week's worth of tape to look at. I'm going to pick up where I left off yesterday to do a tape review of the rest of the games. And let's see, that means Vikings, Niners, Eagles, Falcons, Washington, Miami, Browns, Jets, Rams, Seahawks, Bengals, Raiders, Panthers, Jags, and Titans, Bucks. See what I mean? Fairly jam-packed. If you didn't get to hear the other games, my breakdown of those, please listen to Monday's show. I'll also do a good rundown of the Week 2 waiver wire, the players you should think about adding, and then Will Carroll will stop by to discuss Week 1's most serious fantasy football injuries. Week 1 is over, and maybe you've already fallen out of love with your fantasy team. I hope that's not the case, and even if it is, I think I can help you fix it. But there is a surefire way to fall in love again, and that's DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, you never have to live with your past fantasy mistakes because any week you want, you draft a new team. DraftKings gives you a salary cap, and you pick 9 new players based on that week's matchups. You can look for bargains, play your hunches, all the things we love about our initial fantasy drafts. You get to have that fun feeling every week. It's fantasy football on demand. So you can give it a crack this week, skip next, totally up to you. I went 0 for 1 in the 50-50 leagues last week, thanks to Sam Bradford's underwhelming performance. But I lost $10, so I would say I absolutely got my money's worth in the fun of tracking my DraftKings team. Plus, of course, if you want to go for the big cash, DraftKings will make one player a millionaire every single week. So go there now. DraftKings.com. Use the promo code Harris for a free trial entry. That's DraftKings.com, promo code Harris. Let's talk Vikings Niners. Cousin Josh is in Austin this week for work, so I can't actually be sure that he saw all of Carlos Hyde's greatness in the late game on Monday night, but it was pretty great, right? As many of you on Twitter said, trash bags don't have spin moves like that. You all know how high I was on Hyde this summer, had him rated higher than anyone who did rankings, as far as I know, and it was because we take talent over what we perceive situations to be. Obviously, we also don't really know if the Vikings are good on defense, so it's wise and proper not to get carried away, but Hyde is a borderline top 10 fantasy back. Just like I said all summer, he's big, he's patient, he has that one cut thing that we like. The comparison I usually give is Ricky Williams, and that's what we saw Monday night. By the way, those who had Reggie Bush making it through more than one quarter this year before getting hurt, drink up. How did the 49ers' supposedly bad defense make the Vikings' offense look so bad? They blitzed like crazy. It was a tactic we actually saw a lot around the NFL this week. Put a lot of pressure, clog the middle, make teams pass protect, and make them go down the field. The Ravens did it to Peyton Manning. The Bills did it to Andrew Luck. The Cardinals did it to Drew Brees. And, in an era where teams go multiple in their receiver sets, you have to have a really good offensive line and a really solid pass blocking back. And the fact that Teddy Bridgewater didn't have time to make many plays, and, he blew some open throws too. Mike Wallace did get interfered with in the end zone, and they didn't call it. The refs blew that lack of a call. But if you want to know why Adrian Peterson got relatively stuffed, it's because, as they say, the defense was daring them to throw. I thought Peterson showed flashes. You don't need me to really scout Adrian Peterson at this point in his career. He didn't look significantly reduced in any way. There just wasn't a lot of room to run. The Vikings have some puzzles to solve on offense, but, obviously it'll be fine. Peterson will be fine as long as he's healthy. Please do not trade him. Off the top, you heard me talk about my favorite sports app, which is Fanly. I really hope you'll consider giving it a try. I really do use it myself and find myself checking it multiple times a day rather than having to do all kinds of web searches or hitting a bunch of bookmarks. Fanly does what a sports app, it's supposed to do. It gives me everything that's going on with my favorite teams all in one place. You probably know that the big monolithic sports sites, they have apps and they claim to do the same sort of thing. The problem is they sort of are terrible at it. They try and cram in so much. It makes the app load really slowly. Things are hard to find. And basically, I don't use them. But Fanly has turned me around. It's elegant. It loads fast. And it works the way you want a sports app to work. And if you've heard me talk about Fanly on an earlier show and you checked it out and liked it, hey, tell a friend. Post it to Facebook or Twitter or Reddit, whatever. It helps the show. It helps Fanly. And most importantly, it helps fans. That's Fanly, Fanly.
Film Room Surprise.
I can tell you the moment that rookie running back Tevin Coleman won me over on Monday night, and it actually didn't count in the game. It was an outside zone run to the left on which Andy Levitre was, of course, called for holding, because that's what he does. But Coleman weaved through traffic, powered through a banging tackle. He stayed upright. He kept going. To that point, he'd already gotten around 70 yards rushing. He'd done good work, but there were some moments that I didn't think were great, and you can never be sure that he hasn't taken advantage of, third and long, that kind of thing. He had some open spaces, but seeing that one run, it sort of put me over the top on Tevin Coleman. I think I'm a believer. I'm a convert. I think Coleman is now my guy in Atlanta, even though, it's going to be a committee, and Devontae Freeman will be in there for about half the snaps. But, I come out of Monday night much more impressed with Tevin Coleman than I thought I would be given his college tape, and I'm going to rank him higher than Devontae Freeman, significantly higher going forward. Talk about the Eagles, Matthews to Matthews. Boy, Jordan Matthews got hosed, right? Jordan Matthews owners absolutely got shafted out of a touchdown at the beginning of the fourth quarter. That clearly was a score, but the Eagles did not challenge. Ryan Matthews scores the bunny the play after. I know DeMarco Murray's the one everyone wants to know about. He was bottled up. He had 2 touchdowns in the third quarter, so, you should stop complaining. You got big numbers out of him. He'll be all right. But no, the usage wasn't good, and the Eagles, I felt like, got away from what their personnel says they should be, although they have real questions on that offensive line. John Gruden actually diagrammed it during the game. The outside zone run was working against the Falcons, because the Falcons also were putting a lot of pressure up the middle. In the second half, you saw Darren Sproles run that outside zone several times and perform really well, but overall, Philly passed it 52 times and ran it 16. So Murray really didn't have a chance. I don't think you can look at that game and say Murray's lost anything. I think that Kelly will reassess, and we're going to see them be a little bit more balanced. Sproles had one of those Sproles games, 126 yards from scrimmage on 12 touches. But remember those first 2 games from last season. I don't want to say it's impossible that workload could recur for Sproles because he did get hurt last year, but I'm skeptical. I'm not adding him. He's a gadget player, and the gadget was working on Monday night. As for the receivers, Jordan Matthews did do a pretty nice job until that final pass went through his hands. But I know it's Nelson Aguilar that people are going to worry about. 1 catch, 2 targets. Josh Huff and Miles Austin and Riley Cooper and Aguilar. It's a rotation, and Aguilar hasn't set himself apart yet. This isn't a matter of outside receivers not getting used in this offense. We saw Jeremy Maclin, Deshaun Jackson, they've been huge in this offense. In most leagues, you should not be dumping Nelson Aguilar after just 1 week, but sitting him until you actually see it from him, I think that does make some sense. Let's talk Washington-Miami. Alfred Morris, first series of the game, 6 carries for 35 yards. They were feeding him as the prime game plan. Matt Jones wasn't even the first Alf replacement off the bench. Chris Thompson played on the first 3rd and long. Jones did get 4 straight carries in the second quarter, but for the moment, the way the backfield looks is, Morris definitely focused on early downs. Thompson gets 3rd down, and Jones spells Morris when he needs a breather. It's not a reason to dump Jones, especially because it's 1 game. It's a rookie. He can grow into a bigger role. We're definitely not starting Jones anytime soon. And Morris, if you've listened to the show a bunch, that I always like him. I always have him rated higher than most. He's not a jitterbug guy, but he can really cut hard and go, and he's a load. Very difficult to bring down. Deshaun Jackson hurt his hammy. We'll talk with Will Carroll about that later in the show. In his absence, Pierre Garçon. Hey, he went back to being a guy I really like. I think he's a Steve Smith type. I kind of always have. Good speed, really good quickness, and he got back to being, really ferocious. And that's not just the Fang mouthpiece. As Washington's number 1 receiver for a few weeks, he's a fantasy starter. He's owned in most leagues, but, in case he's available in yours, he'd be a candidate to be the top waiver guy. I think, probably he's not available in yours, but go check. Jordan Reed, what can I say? This is what Jordan Reed is. When he's healthy, he's a monster, and he helped me win a game this weekend. I probably shouldn't have won, but if I could trade him for a good player right now, I think I'd probably do it. He's going to get hurt. Kirk Cousins was all right. Game managed right until the end. Though, that interception wasn't really his fault. That was a great play by the defense, but we should know that on the play right before that big pick, he threw into double coverage and should have been intercepted, and he tried hard to throw another pick on the game's final drive too, so I'm willing to trust Garçon. I'm much less willing to trust Cousins based on what I saw on this tape. As for the Dolphins, listen, not too many conclusions can be drawn. They just didn't have the ball much in the first half. Twitter was definitely twittering about Lamar Miller, and it definitely wasn't awesome that Damian Williams stole a 4th and 1 carry because it makes you think he might do the same thing on the goal line. But Miller showed flashes in the second half when he finally actually got to play. He'll be all right. Jarvis Landry stands out, and not just for the punt return touchdown that won the game. On a third-quarter red zone trip, the Finns fed it to him, and they really seem to want the ball in his hands as much as possible. I think Landry deserves an upgrade. He's impressive, not a burner, but just a really good athlete. I think even in standard leagues, I'm going to have him a little higher than I had him in August. I'm impressed with his tape. Jordan Cameron, not hurt yet. The 2 Jordan tight ends in this game, not hurt yet. That's good. Jordan Cameron's a good player when he's not hurt. I prefer Jordan Reed, but Cameron's a good player. Reed's probably more likely to get hurt. They're both going to get hurt, let's face it. Ryan Tannehill. It was a disappointment. I would say, though, other than that ridiculous, awful fumble, which, led to that Three Stooges, Keystone Cops running around on the field, I wouldn't say Tannehill did anything particularly wrong. It's just a reminder that the Dolphins' offense is conservative by nature. It wants to go in tiny little increments, especially because, Kenny Stills wasn't a big factor until late in the game, and even then, just a couple of targets. Devontae Parker, I think, played 1 snap. So they're there really wasn't much of a deep threat even on the field. I'm not going to give up entirely on Tannehill after one game, but it's a reminder that that's a conservative offense.
Game Film Rewind.
I focused on Brandon Marshall in that Browns-Jets game. Huge early play, stripping away an interception. A bunch of targets, scored a touchdown with that sort of fade, that 1-yard fade over the top of Joe Hayden, which is hard to do. Hayden played it really well. He toe-tapped a great catch in the red zone. Ryan Fitzpatrick continues to be not good. He tries to throw so many picks, but the Browns defense usually couldn't catch him. But Brandon Marshall, very impressive. Was fun to go back and look at every target he had after I watched that film, and I continue to be very bullish on Marshall. Chris Ivory also continues to be my guy. We talked about him last week for both Commissioner Style and for DFS. I'm still buying his size and his quick feet. It will be interesting to see how the Jets defense fares against the Colts in week 2 because they were awfully strong Sunday. But you say, yeah, it's against the Browns. Let's see them against a real NFL offense. And then turning my attention to the Browns, Isaiah Crowell's first 3 runs, I think they went for 1 yard, and he was just getting met in the backfield. So we have to ask ourselves, right, this Cleveland offensive line that we heard so much about, how they were really good and one of the best in the league, I expressed some doubt about that in August, and now we have to see. Either they're not all that good, or the Jets D-line just is that good, which is possible. I think week 2 will help us out figuring that out in that regard. Duke Johnson, there's still some Trey Mason type appeal there. He showed a little bit of quickness and some good balance, but, not fantasy-wise until there's actually room to run. And Johnny Manziel, he may get to start week 2 against the Titans, as Josh McCown just seemed hell-bent on concussing himself. He took 3 huge shots in the first quarter. The third one did concuss him. Manziel blew an easy touchdown throw to Andrew Hawkins. Had 2 really nice runs, long ones, called back by penalty, but generally doesn't run as much as I expected him to do in the NFL, and that really removes a lot of his potential fantasy appeal, as does the fact that he kept getting sacked and fumbling once the game was out of hand. Let's do a little Rams-Seahawks. There's not a ton of reason to linger here. First observation after watching this tape was that the Rams pass rush is for real and maybe the best in the NFL, and the Seahawks on defense were extraordinarily disorganized. Those were my overriding impressions. You can't draw a straight line and automatically say it's Cam Chancellor, but maybe it's Cam Chancellor. They were really bad on defense. Jared Cook running free down the sidelines, uncovered in the first half. Stedman Bailey completely uncovered on the first play of the second half. Cook again uncovered in the third quarter. The game-tying play when Chancellor's replacement, Deion Bailey, falls down. Boy, they didn't score badly for fantasy, but they got to get their act together. They have the Packers this week. I said I was gun-shy about using Benny Cunningham against that defense, and I still think Cunningham is a try-hard, pretty good player. He had a really nice game. He did a fine Alfred Morris who can catch kind of impersonation, and he's owned in 16% of Yahoo leagues. Week 2 against Washington, if Trey Mason isn't back, I can absolutely see Cunningham as an ad. More about that when we get to the waivers. Marshawn Lynch, just fine. Russell Wilson, under siege all day, but ran some, developed some in-game chemistry with Jimmy Graham, missing him once in the end zone on a jump ball, and then boom, very next play, they connect on a similar call. You want to talk about the most dominant offensive line I saw against potentially the poorest defensive line, the Bengals, just absolutely blew the Raiders off the ball. You mostly saw Jeremy Hill, but Gio Bernard too, on occasion. They had yards before they were touched. Yards and yards routinely. This game got out of hand so fast. People are asking me if it's worth panicking on A.J. Green, and it's obviously not. You should know that the Bengals did take a couple deep shots to Green early when it was close, and Green dropped a sure touchdown, which is unfortunate. And at some point, the Bengals were like, what's the point? So Green didn't get as involved as the game went along. It was not really a contest. Tyler Eifert, what he has to prove, obviously, is that he's not just another tight end who will flash and disappear the next week. The Raiders played a ton of zone, and Eifert basically kept finding empty spots on the field, but he's got lots of athletic upside. So even when somebody's playing man on him, you can definitely imagine him being open. He will be in my top 10 tight ends this week. It was an impressive effort. You don't want to completely disbelieve your eyes. It was a good job, and he was healthy. Derek Carr hurt his hand stiff-arming a dude, which is kind of awesome. While he was in there, he didn't look like he'd improved very much, at least in the first quarter. Latavius Murray, and I should mention that my spell check corrects that to Laxatives Murray. He was plugged up tighter than a Wonder Bra, as I like to say. But the good news about Murray is he did stay on the field a lot. He was out there pretty much all 3 downs whenever he didn't need a rest. Roy Halou was a healthy scratch in that game. So the idea that Halou is a clear handcuff for Murray seems not to be the case. I guess just the hope has to be that Murray's going to find more space in future weeks. Unfortunately, the Ravens look like a really bad matchup in week 2. Panthers-Jaguars. Cam Newton is a runner again. The read option was in effect right away. Newton kept one on the second play of the game. Jonathan Stewart had a big gain on a handoff out of the read option on that same drive. I counted 5 keepers for Newton out of the read option, which I love for his fantasy stock. So I'm feeling good about Cam again, I have to say. Greg Olsen, 1 catch for 11 yards. Obviously, fantasy owners not happy. You should realize that he caught a touchdown on the Panthers' first drive, but it was called back for what I thought was a bogus offensive pass interference call. Put it this way, if Jordan Reed's touchdown wasn't offensive interference, then Olsen's definitely shouldn't have been. Stewart's output, slowed down after the first quarter. I am not concerned about Jonathan Stewart. He'll be fine. The Panthers' wideouts, kind of a joke. As expected, not a good performance. Ted Ginn somehow dropped 2 touchdowns on different drives in the first quarter. A red zone slant that just clanged off his hands. A blown coverage where he was literally standing by himself on the 5-yard line and did not catch the ball. Devin Funchess had an easy catch on an out, and it banged off of his hands. Olsen dropped one in the fourth quarter. There's an opportunity for someone to step up here, but nobody has yet. Allen Robinson, also a drop. His first target of the day. I'm not going to blame Allen Robinson for his bad production, though. Generally speaking, I think you should understand why skepticism on Robinson was warranted. It's about Blake Bortles. All that preseason goodness floated away with his floaty little pass that Josh Norman took for the game's key pick 6. There's no question that Bortles can look good throw to throw, but the yips, he almost is like a putter with the yips. They always seem close at hand. He's going to sail one or throw one into the ground. That passing game, boy, I'm not there yet. But let's be positive, because the player I was, other than Tevin Coleman, I'll say, the player I was most pleasantly surprised with the entire weekend was TJ Yeldon. He definitely has the size, but I want to see a big kid like this be able to cut back and not run like he's a little guy. And Yeldon did that really well. You have to be somewhat skeptical of anyone consistently producing in this offense, but I have to say, another guy whose college tape I didn't always love, whose college situation I didn't always love, I'm a buyer on Yeldon. I probably could not have said that in August.
Doug Martin will break your heart.
Yes, and we saved the Bucks for last, and we're not going to blame Doug Martin for this pathetic work. I think Jameis Winston had more to do with it, but Martin didn't exactly produce, and we see the risk inherent in valuing him too highly. I'll just start with Tennessee. You can't even believe some of the holes that Bishop Sankey had to run through. He had 74 yards on 12 rushes. I swear, if I'd been the running back, I think I'd have had 40. I'm going to go ahead and say maybe the Titans don't have an all-time great offensive line, and maybe it was the Bucs being terrible. Boy, are the Bucs terrible. Jameis Winston is so terrible. Every worry we had about him in the preseason is now multiplied by 1,000,000. Whereas we were all so, potentially excited about how Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson could both be fantasy studs. Now the question is, can you trust either one in your fantasy lineup? Austin Seferian-Jenkins scores twice, which is nice, but really hard to promise it's repeatable and a huge blowout loss. And then there's the muscle hamster himself. A couple okay runs. He looked fine, but, it just happened so quickly. Now they're losing 21-0. There's not a lot of conclusions that you can draw once the team is down 3 touchdowns. They're just completely out of sorts and not running very much. The Titans apparently came into this game with Terrence West established as their short yardage back, which that would be a slap to Sankey's fantasy stock, but West somehow got stuffed 3 times from the 1 at 225 pounds, like 3 in a row. And basically the 4th time, the Titans were like, Terrence, come on out. Sankey going in there. In the third quarter, he got a carry from the 1, and he converted. So if the Titans are learning anything, you would think that may take. Lastly, Marcus Mariota. Listen, it was terrific stuff. I think he might have ended the weekend with the highest QBR of any quarterback in the league. He didn't make any mistakes. He threw well on the run. But, did he ever really get pressure? Did he ever really need to rush to a secondary read? This is historically quarterback. It's just a really hard position for rookies to play. The idea that Mariota is now a star and won't have hiccups, it's very tough for me to swallow. Then again, the Titans get the Browns in week 2, so I may have them in my top 15 quarterbacks this week, but not higher than that. Because if we've learned anything over the years, I am a party pooper.
Let's talk waiver wire.
Yes, let's talk waiver wire. So we need to look at potential free agents in your league heading into week 2. There are some teams who need running back solutions, and I don't see a lot of awesome full-season running back answers out there on most waiver wires. Maybe Chris Johnson in Arizona. I probably would rate him ahead of David Johnson because it feels like the Cardinals aren't ready to trust a rookie, even though David Johnson made a big play in that game on Sunday. Chris Johnson, as of this recording, owned in about 10% of Yahoo leagues, and I just don't think he'll be great. But it sounds like Andre Ellington may miss some time. We'll talk to Will Carroll about that. Bishop Sankey, he's owned in just fewer than half of Yahoo leagues, and that means, I think he's worth adding in all leagues, but, again, I don't know. This week against the Browns, yeah, I think I could see him as a fantasy starter consistently. Boy, I don't know. I'm not sure I think he's a great player, and I really don't think that offensive line is great. Maybe, there are 2 guys who are maybe more like 1-week running back solutions. Benny Cunningham, I mentioned him earlier in this show. Hey, listen, rock solid. High usage, some nice plays, nothing that blows you away. And the matchup is really good against Washington in week 2. So I say if there's no Trey Mason and there won't be any Todd Gurley, then Benny Cunningham's worth, a short-term start. I would say for somebody looking for a week 2 solution, he's probably my top running back available in most leagues. He's taken in 16% of Yahoo leagues as of this recording. And D'Angelo Williams, let's not forget about him. Thursday night against the Patriots, he was awfully good. He gets one more outing. It's just that outing doesn't maybe look quite as tasty after we just saw the 49ers do a really good job with some no-name personnel against Adrian Peterson. I think Williams is a fine 1-week solution. Remember, Le'Veon Bell's coming back week 3. Williams is owned in 37% of Yahoo leagues. Let's see. I would say maybe the number 1 guy to grab off waiver wires is James Jones, if he's available in your league. 31% ownership in Yahoo coming into week 1. And James Jones has got a touchdown-making role in that Packer offense. I talked about that at length on Monday's show. Terrence Williams, as a Dez Bryant replacement, he's not a great analog for what Bryant can do. He's not a really physical player. He's not a great route runner. He's got some size, and he's got pretty good speed for that size. But also, I'm not even sure Terrence Williams qualifies for this conversation because he's owned in 58% of Yahoo leagues. But I'd say after Jones, maybe Williams is my number 2 receiver available. There's not a ton else that I can see as having tons and tons and tons of value. Other receivers you could take a look at, and this is roughly in the order that I would think about putting claims in on them. Dante Moncrief, 11% of Yahoo leagues. Brandon Coleman, 27% of Yahoo leagues. Philip Dorsett, 11%. Danny Amendola, 11%. That's I think in 12-team leagues, it's going to be tough to start those guys until you start seeing production out of them. Other running backs who I didn't mention, there are going to be folks who say Dion Lewis, but LeGarrette Blount is back, and you heard my discussion last Friday on the podcast about Dion Lewis. He's awfully small. Maybe Lance Dunbar in a point-per-reception league, but are the Cowboys going to be in that situation where they're throwing, and done, seems like super game flow dependent? Buck Allen, not owned hardly in any leagues, and you could take a look at him in case Justin Forsett falters, but not super excited about any of those guys. I think I've sort of hit the top players. I think the top waiver claims probably are receivers, James Jones, Terrence Williams. At tight end, I like Eric Ebron. I had him higher than most folks did coming into the year. He scores a touchdown in week 1. Of course, he also had a bad drop, but I give him a chance to be valuable. He's not a fantasy starter right away, but he's got a chance to work his way into that, so could be a deep league add. Ladarius Green, owned in 20% of leagues, had really nice output, for the next few weeks. He could be okay. I kind of need to see it one more time from him before I could think about starting him, because it feels like to me he might be part of that tight end middle class that is on 1 week, off another week, and of course Antonio Gates has 3 more games off. But Ladarius Green, a potential add. If you're streaming a defense, I think it's pretty clear. The lightly owned defense that's got the best looking matchup is the Titans, owned in 2% of Yahoo leagues. They're going up against the Browns. It may be Johnny Manziel at quarterback. Can't say that Manziel can't perform okay, but I give the Titans a decent chance to pitch another good outing against a quarterback who's shaky. Now, I know that's a lot of names, and you are currently at the gym on the treadmill and do not have a pen and paper handy, or you are driving and you do not have the ability to pull over to the side of the road on the highway and write down all these names. And I know that a lot of you liked the waiver column that I used to write for ESPN for many years, and that's why I am writing a waiver column for Vice Sports. They're very good people, and they are having me write them a couple columns a week. I will tweet out a link. Usually that will be available Tuesday afternoon or so I would expect to see a link to Vice Sports, and all these names will, in fact, be in that column.
Today's guest.
And today's guest is Will Carroll of FanDuel, an injury expert who's such an injury expert that his Twitter handle is @InjuryExpert. That, my friend, is truth in advertising.
So many people give me grief about that Twitter handle. They're like, why do you call yourself an injury expert? You're not a doctor. I was like, because Will Carroll was taken when I signed on to Twitter. That was taken. I can remember this clearly. Okay, Will Carroll was taken. W. Carroll was taken. I thought, let me do something clever. King of Pain. That was also taken. Thanks a lot, Sting. So injury expert was the best I could come up with on short notice. The two things that have maybe changed my life as much as anything are my Twitter name, which there was no thought in it, and when I named Under the Knife, my original baseball injury column, which I put no thought into it. There was no focus groups, no marketing involvement. So yeah, I should probably, if I ever come up to something I have to name, I should probably put more thought into it, Chris.
No, I think it's fine. It's good. It's truth in advertising. Speaking of focus groups, obviously, we here at the Little Podcast That Could spent millions to come up with Harris Football.
Yeah, exactly. But see, sometimes it just works. So yeah, and certainly this podcast works. It's become one of my new favorites, Chris. Well, and I'm not just saying that.
Thank you very much. So we're having you aboard here after week 1 is over, and we're going to talk some of the injuries that are shaping the fantasy world. We should preface by saying you have good sources, and you definitely know a heck of a lot more than I do, but it's not like you're there literally examining the injured ligament themselves.
Yeah. This is true. Yeah, it's always funny. It happens at least once a year that one particular thing happens. Because I'm not there. I'm not putting my hands on these guys, and I'm not a doctor, so you wouldn't want me doing that anyway. Every year, somebody will send me a tweet or something on Facebook and say, "What's wrong with this guy?" And I'll say, "He's still laying on the field." Do you see anybody with a phone there calling me? I don't know. Yeah. In game, I honestly don't know much more than anybody else. Yeah. There's some guys out there like Dr. David Chow, who does a great job watching videos and telling you what things are, but I am not that guy.
Right. Well, but you are going to help us sort of contextualize the injuries that we saw. And actually, for week 1, considering past years, it wasn't that carnage-strewn of a week.
No, it's just a lot of big names.
Right.
And that skews the perception a bit.
Right. We'll start with Dez Bryant, because that's the most important name. He was a first-round pick in most leagues, or a lot of leagues. And he has a broken bone in his foot. What do you know? What can you speculate on? How should we guide the fantasy owners?
Well, originally we knew that it was a broken foot. There was some speculation on what kind of break it was. Turns out it is a Jones fracture. Now, we've seen people with this before, a lot of big names. Julio Jones had this, Ahmad Bradshaw, Marvin Jones. It's odd that a bunch of people with Jones as their name have a Jones fracture. If you follow basketball closely, you've probably followed Kevin Durant's saga with this. He's had to have a couple revisions of this. There are a lot of people that have had complications with this type of fracture. What they do is they go in and they put a screw straight through the bone, not across like a lot of people think, but like through it. So it looks like a screw is inside the bone. And sometimes, talking to Ahmad Bradshaw a couple of years ago when this happened to him, he goes, "The screw is loose. I literally have a screw loose," and it kind of rattles a little bit, and they can feel it, and that's got to be uncomfortable. I've never had anything like that, but that's just got to be uncomfortable. Anyway, for Dez Bryant, obviously he has to be able to cut. He has to be able to accelerate. You do kind of turn your feet laterally when you're accelerating and put a lot of pressure on that. So this one's going to take longer than they were originally saying. The 4 to 6 weeks that Jerry Jones was trying to sell to the media, that was never that much of a realistic. So 6 to 8 weeks is possible. I'm not saying 6 is probable, but it's possible at least. And you do have to worry about complication. Though we have seen players come back. Marvin Jones came back at 7 weeks. There was somebody else that came back at 8 weeks. So 7 to 8 weeks is where I think he will be. So it would not surprise me if they put him on the IR with the designation for return.
That's brutal. It was a brutal loss for fantasy owners. I think you're going to tell me that T.Y. Hilton is a less brutal loss, although, we're also, speaking of owners who are telling us about injury diagnosis, we should always totally believe 100% every owner who tells us about injury diagnosis, right?
In terms of T.Y. Hilton, he has a really nasty bruise on the outside of his tibia. That's the shin bone, lower leg. It's basically as if he was hit with a hammer, or what we hear more. There's a type of fracture, a tibial plateau fracture. Kobe Bryant had this 2 years ago when he fell and hit his leg. But it's often called a bumper fracture. And for obvious reasons. Car hits you on the outside of the leg, pedestrian walking across the street, it fractures the bone, but there's also a lot of bruising. Well, that's what they were worried that he had, because he got hit by a helmet on the outside of his leg. But there's no fracture there. It is just a really, really nasty bruise. And I'm sure all of us have had a bruise. I'm sure all of us have walked into the coffee table, and you hobble around for a little bit, and you basically just ice it and wait for it to go away, which is what the Colts are going to be doing. It doesn't look like he'll be ready to go this week, which makes it some very interesting fantasy questions, Chris. I'm curious to see how the Jets respond, because you would have thought that Darrelle Revis would have been on T.Y. Hilton quite a bit. Now they've got a lot of receivers, but they don't have that number one receiver. Does Revis go on Moncrief? Does Revis go on Andre Johnson to try to take away the number one target guy? Does Philip Dorsett go right into the role of T.Y. Hilton, which is what a lot of people thought when he was drafted? This one's going to be really, really intriguing. But the injury itself, just a bruise.
Right, and no Cromartie there, so that adds adds to the mess. Andre Ellington, I talked about him with the fantasy footballers on yesterday's show, the three guys who are in Arizona and are Cardinals fans, and they said that when they saw that injury, and I also saw it, I was watching Red Zone at that moment, I thought it was a torn ACL. I thought he was done. That was that non-contact injury where the guy goes down and you say, uh-oh, he's done. But it seems like that's not the case, right?
No, it's not. Looking back at the video, it's just a really quirky mechanism. Normally PCL injuries, the posterior cruciate ligament, which isn't so much the opposite as just opposite of the ACL. It's in the back of the knee. Normally you get those on hyperextension injuries. Andre Johnson, a couple of years ago, just mentioned him, and he's healthy now. He got hit directly straight forward. His knee kind of tried to bend back the wrong way. And the PCL is what stops the leg from doing that. So you put too much force directly on it. Watching Ellington's, he kind of, pigeon toe rolled his ankle, and then he must have fallen just the wrong way, because this is not the normal mechanism. But because of this, it's not that severe either. It's a grade 1 sprain. We'll have to see how he responds to this, but this could be as little as a week. Most of the doctors and trainers that I've talked to say, look, I've never seen anything like this, so I would hold him out just a little bit given his history. So I think we're going to see 2 or 3 games that he misses.
And that's consistent with what folks have at least been telling us out of the Cardinals organization, although, again, you listen to them because they tell you stuff in private. I don't listen because nobody talks to me, man. Who wants to talk to me? So then I look at Monday night. Reggie Bush, another injury that at the moment when he's hobbling off on one foot, unable to put any weight on the injured appendage, makes me think, oh, this is really serious and maybe a knee, but I guess it's turned out to be a calf. Is that right?
Yeah, it looks like it's a calf strain. He did look at a good bit of pain, and there are a couple things. Again, I try not to diagnose just by video. I don't diagnose at all, but It's difficult to say. There are 2 things you can usually tell something from. The first is when somebody falls and has an injury, they will tend to grab at where the injury is. It's just instinctual. You hurt your knee, you grab at your knee. You hurt your hamstring, you grab at your hamstring. And it's a little telling. You can learn something from that. The second is pain. And a lot of people say, well, pain tolerance is different for everybody, which is true. But the worst pain you ever had is the worst pain you've ever had. Study after study has shown that, how you rate your pain is very, very accurate. If you've been to the emergency room and they say rate the pain 1 to 10, that's accurate. Even though, virtually every woman will tell you the worst pain is childbirth, and every man will tell you getting kicked in the junk is the worst. There's all sorts of things. Maybe the worst pain you ever had is, a paper cut. That's still a 10 to you. And for players, reacting in severe pain, especially when you see them, screaming or crying, or flailing around, that's the one that really worries me, because that's an instinct against protection, and that means you've got a pretty severe injury. You're just trying to deal with the pain before you go into shock. So the reaction of pain that Reggie Bush had does have me worried. It's a calf strain. We're going to have to see how severe, but we know Reggie Bush and his injury history are well known, so anything here is going to make it tough. Carlos Hyde looked good. Jared Hayne is certainly an interesting story. We'll have to see whether he's a good football player.
Yeah, I have my doubts. The Chris Berman, Trent Dilfer broadcast notwithstanding.
I love Chris, and I think Trent's a good analyst, but man, that was painful last night.
So let's talk to Sean Jackson. Is this the same hamstring that was bothering him in training camp? I don't think I ever bothered to remember which leg that was.
That's a great question, Chris, and I never looked it up either, because this one's so severe that I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
It's an intriguing thought. It's something I probably should look up. But, this is one where you could actually see how it happened. He ran down the field, he reached for the ball, and instead of falling, he kind of stretched his legs out and had kind of an odd gait at the end there, and that's when it happened. He just overstretched the leg. The muscle gave, and it was very, very severe. Talked to some people that said the entire back of his leg was bruised up. This is not uncommon. Anything where you get into a grade 2 strain, the muscle fibers are tearing and there's going to be bleeding. So, the whole back of his leg was discolored. Again, not exceptionally uncommon, but it's one of the tough things to see because it's just ugly and it's painful. And for a speed guy like Jackson, it's probably going to be a month before he's back, and we'll have to see whether he's in stride at that point.
Yeah, that's a rough one. It seems like C.J. Anderson, who I don't even know what the heck happened to him. He seemed to be.
Turf toe.
It was toe because they're tucking hand. Turf toe, eh?
Yeah, he was turf toe. Demaryius Thomas was hand. And I've seen a couple posts where people got those crossed up. C.J. Anderson does have turf toe, but a lot of people that I've talked to, Troy Rink, one of the great beat writers, used to be with Rockies, now he follows the Broncos, actually talked to C.J. Anderson, and the beat writers do such a great job. And when they're actually asking the right questions, that really helps my job out. Turf toe is painful and lingering, but it's very simply a sprain. The big toe gets pulled back. It's easier to do this with your hand. If you take your index finger and just pull it back like you're trying to take it backwards, that's what happens to the big toe. And the ligament that holds that gets stretched is painful. And because you use your big toe a whole lot more than you think, it's a tough one to overcome. It's painful. It lingers. So hopefully this is just minor. I'm curious to see how much they split the carries out. We'll have to watch to see exactly how he participates in practice this week.
Would you say for C.J. Anderson owners, this is a reason to downgrade him until they see him running normally? Because we hear turf toe, we think of guys losing entire seasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would at least have your backup plan ready to go. The tough part to read is that, Gary Kubiak doesn't, excuse me, Gary Kubiak doesn't tend to split his backs up much. Certainly we think of Peyton Manning swapping backs out and needing a back who can pass block. Well, C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman can both do that. So, I don't know how much that factored into last week's split. We don't know exactly when the sprain happened for Anderson, so this is a tough one to read. And so, yeah, I would definitely back off Anderson a little bit.
Well, this has been great, Will. I thank you very, very much for doing this. And we mentioned off the top that folks should be following Will for the best injury news in the business at Injury Expert. And I guess you're going to be there Monday night for the Jets-Colts game?
I will be there. This is the first time I've gone to a Colts game in the new stadium, so I'm excited.
Awesome, man. Well, enjoy it, and we'll have you back on soon, and we can't thank you enough.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys.
And that's our show. Did I not say that it would be jam-packed? Did you not learn a lot? Were you not entertained? I will have preliminary Week 2 ranks on the site, harrisfootball.com. on Tuesday afternoon/evening, and we'll talk about those ranks on Wednesday's show. Brandon Funston from Yahoo will come aboard, and we'll talk about his ranks and my ranks and what we expect for Week 2. You can feel free to tweet questions about my ranks or email them, heyharris@harrisfootball.com, and I will spend part of Wednesday's show trying to address some of your rankings, questions, and concerns. Thank you again very much for listening, and I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The end theme is Tooth and Claw by OU Villain. Subscribe to the Harris Football Podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.